In this essay, we're going to focus in on Metallica and looking at them sort of mid-career and them finding themselves haunted by a lot of psychological and mental issues. Now, I can't claim to be unbiased. I am a big fan of Metallica. I'm not obsessed with them to the degree with something like Rage Against the Machine or Guns N' Roses or one of those groups. And the band has always, I think, been tricky in terms of situating it as kind of this very raw metal band that became progressively more and more popular and became part of the mainstream. So this documentary sort of looks at them right after the 2000s, after they faced a lot of triumphs, but also a lot of controversies, getting involved in a big fight with Napster, and a lot of internal fights within the band sort of come to the surface. And this documentary crew is just there to record essentially them trying to finish an album, and then it becomes a kind of jumping board for other things. So good points and bad points. I do think we get a lot of the band being very honest with themselves, especially Lars. I liked him the most. I think he gets the most exploration out of all of them, though there's a lot of focus on James and his alcohol problems. But I think Lars is probably the really the star of this. They also play on some cliches because we have a therapist and he sort of plays the villain, but I think he plays that villain role very well, so I thought that was interesting. So I do think we get a very honest portrayal of the group, but this is a media production and the filmmakers are critical, but they are friendly, so it sort of stops at a certain point. So if you want a full-blown expose on Metallica, this is not it. This is a very friendly but still critical look at the band and their fan base and how they've interacted with one another over a decade, and them trying to move beyond old controversies and redefine themselves. The bad points. You're going to be hearing a lot of the greatest hits of Metallica. We're also going to see their process at work, but I don't think this is how they actually make music, so it's a little deceptive. Sometimes they're able to record really, really quickly, so I think the documentary is distortive in that regard because it makes it seem like every record they do is very long and drawn out. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes they do their records fairly quickly. Also, I wish we got more of them on tour. This is really about them relaxing behind the scenes and sort of what they do on their leisure time, which I thought was fascinating. But again, one of the trademarks of Metallica is that they are a tour band, and this documentary kind of fails in that respect. We do see a couple of snippets of them live, and those are very powerful, but really we never get a sense of the band sort of on the road, and I thought that would have been better if they integrated both those parts. And even though we do get into, a lot of their private lives, there's clearly a certain limit as to how much we're going to get exposed to who they really are. In that respect, you have to say the word documentary with quotes. It is a documentary, right? There's no intentional lying or anything like that. And I do think the filmmakers tried to do the best they can. But again, this is limited in terms of how far it's going to go with the group. If you're not a fan of Metallica, this is a very good introduction. I probably will not change anybody's mind because, again, they've taken a lot of controversial stances, many of which I disagree with. I think the music has maintained itself and it's been very strong. But I would have to say, in comparison to something like Guns N' Roses or Rage Against the Machine or another band, they're not as innovative or as revolutionary. They've pretty much updated their style pretty calmly and smoothly, and you can't really avoid it that they often have followed a trend instead of creating a trend. Earlier in their career, they were much more trendsetters. Now they're more sort of content to sort of follow the leader and just do really great music, but not really try to break out of the mold. So again, if you had doubts about Metallica and their credibility of being sort of true artists, this is not going to persuade you in the slightest. However, if you are more open about the band and you are a fan, we're going to fill in a couple of gaps. It's not a full story. Again, this is only getting a snapshot of them already being successful. So if you want more, you're going to have to look at other documentaries and a lot of other interviews to get a much fuller portrait of Metallica. It's still a snapshot. This is very good. I don't believe a lot of these quotations that it's one of the best documentaries of all time. It's not. It's not up there with Roger and Me. It's not one of the truly great documentaries you have to see before you die. Nor is it, I think, one of the best music documentaries. But it is very respectable. It's very powerful. I think it's very moving. It does play on several cliches, emotional, right? We see the band with their family and things like that. So, yeah, there are a few moments that are a little overly sentimental to me that weren't necessary. But again, it is what it is. It's trying to provide a kind of pro and con argument for Metallica. It's obviously more on the pro side. It's probably interesting to see if somebody will eventually produce a much more critical documentary to sort of balance this one out. But so far, this is a pretty good snapshot of the group. And I think if you're just a fan of music, I think you can learn a lot, even if you're not into Metallica. So very highly recommend. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. Some kind of monster. Look at Metallica behind the scenes. Thank you for listening.